The Phoenix Suns wasted no time shuffling their front office in addition to their coaching staff this offseason, moving on from 2 assistant general managers and hiring a new one. That plus a bunch of pressure to win now on James Jones' shoulders has us asking the question that we will try to answer on today's episode of Locked On Suns. Is this James Jones' last chance this summer to turn the Suns around and get them that title? Let's go.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we're back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Brendon Kleen, a credentialed media member, covering the Suns for the past 7 seasons and the host of the Just Basketball Show, wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for making Locked On Suns your first listen to start off your Friday. Hopefully you're looking forward to the holiday weekend, but thank you for spending the last day here with us. Before that, hit follow or subscribe if you haven't already. We're free and available everywhere, including YouTube. Get a new episode in your feed every single Monday through Friday into the offseason and beyond. Become an everyday or get locked on to the Phoenix Suns as the offseason rolls along. Today's episode brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Joining us as he does every single week is Stephen PridGeon. He is a writer over at Bright Side of the Sun, a podcaster over at PHNX, and we are going to talk about all things James Jones, all things Suns front office today, Stephen, because the Suns have made multiple moves already in their front office, just as Matt Ishbia told us he would, or John Gambadoro reported that they would. At the beginning of the offseason, they've hired Matt Tellem, son of Arn Tellem, who people will probably recognize that name, longtime agent, works in the Detroit front office now. Matt, his son, has actually worked for the Nets for more than a decade. He's going to be the new cap guy in Phoenix. Got shining, glowing praise from Bobby Marks on the PHNX podcast the other day, who worked with him in Brooklyn, so take that for what you will. And then they moved on from Trevor Buckstein, who basically was that guy, not just with James Jones, not just with Ryan McDonough before that, but even before that with Lon Babby. We're going back 15 plus years with Trevor Buckstein here, so a big move to see him go. And then Morgan Cato, who they had brought on during Robert Sarver's suspension, basically, the summer of 2022. So she's been here for 2 years now. She's gone as well. These moves to me, Stephen, I think just add more pressure to James Jones' shoulders to right this ship, nail the moves that he has to make this offseason, and prove that in this new reality that Matt Ishbia has created for this team of being in the second apron and all in on a big three, that he can still make the right moves to improve every offseason. If he can't do that, I think the last move to make, it might be him.
Yes, and I think that was something that really stood out to me when Matt Ishbia was brought in the first place. I think he, to condense a lot of what he said, he spoke to coming in and wanting to move furniture and bring out some of the old stuff, the stuff that pre-existed prior to him, and to do like a somewhat of a reset. In a sense, Get a breath of fresh air in there, get some new faces in there, some more current, more modern faces, some different type of thinkers. I think, like you said, we're starting to see it. Everything is revolved around James Jones, and now we're getting to the point where the only other thing to change, if things do not change in the on-court product sense, will be him. And I think naturally with that comes pressure. Obviously, you have a win now roster. You also have a win now owner that is showing that he has no hesitation to pull a trigger on change if he sees that it will help to be conducive to a winning environment. And the last domino to fall would be James, should he not be able to make things happen this summer and see them come to fruition over the regular season and into the playoffs and next season.
You go back to the offseason in 2018, they draft Ayton, they trade up and draft Mikal Bridges, they hire James Jones, promote him, I should say, that fall. Book is in place. They hire Monty the next summer. There's been a lot of times that the idea has gotten thrown around as they've made all these moves under Ishbia of, Book is the last guy left. And I've always pointed out, no, Book and James Jones are the last guys left. And you're not going to trade Book unless he makes you. So, that's just one more kind of domino tilting toward, well, if this keeps not working, the finger has to keep getting pointed somewhere. And often that's just how this stuff goes. But you mentioned even dating back to last February when Ishbia took the team over. I got to admit, assuming because we've been a month into the offseason now and haven't seen anything, 2 off seasons now that Ishbia has been running this thing, that James Jones has survived. I have to admit, I'm kind of surprised that he's made it this far. It's not I think after 2022, you could see, okay, best season in franchise history. You're really going to fire the GM because the players kind of fell apart against Dallas. Not really. But last year, I would have understood it. This year, I would have understood it. Somehow he's survived. I've always said James Jones is kind of superpower as a GM, and we're going to get into some of the moves he has made or what he could make in the future or whatever. And I'm not going to argue that there's been mistakes, but I think his superpower has been to accomplish the vision of whatever ownership and whatever the current goals are. He's going to go fully in that direction and do all the things to get there. He might not do it right. He might end up not achieving the ultimate goal, obviously, of winning a championship, but he's going to do what Sarver wanted him to do, what Ishbia wanted him to do, all in this, trade this guy, rebuild that way, get all the minimum guys you can get. He definitely does it. And I think that's why he's survived, but I am surprised that it's taken this long and he's still kind of in that seat. I didn't expect it under an owner who's been so all in.
Yeah, and I think especially in win-now situations and scenarios, part of it to get the staying power in his position is to kind of play the game and be a people pleaser in a sense. But I think the GMs that see the most success in win-now scenarios are the ones that are putting their jobs on the line in a sense and taking some risks, thinking outside the box, doing something that might, have some repercussions if it doesn't work. But again, like the saying goes, whether it be in life, whether it be in business, no risk it, no biscuit. You can't play it. You can only play it safe for so long. And, I feel like we're at that point where it's like we talked about in the opening, he's going to either have to make a couple of moves to shake the tree up a little bit that's going to be risky and play the risk and reward game. Otherwise, you stay safe, you're going to get similar results, which is a mixed bag, and it's going to be underwhelming in terms of an overall projection in terms of how they do next season. And I think there's limbo that comes with that. But again, when you're in that situation, you gotta lay it on the line some, and he's at that point right now.
That's always been what's interesting to me and why we should just jump into, I think, what those moves have been in the past, because I went back through when I was talking about the G League team showing up here in yesterday's episode. Basically, this James Jones has always been all in. There's numerous quotes from the minute he took over that he wants to do what it takes to win. They're on the record saying they would have taken Cam Johnson 6th in 2019 if they could have, and all these different things along the way that they lock into what their goal is, and they're not worried about value. They're not worried about winning the press conference or Kevin Pelton's trade grades on ESPN Plus or any of that. That's not their focus. And yet there have been some times where, because of maybe a lack of alignment or just whiffing on what those moves actually were, that their mentality might have been to be all in, but the result didn't feel that way. So there was some news that came out this week about a Deandre Ayton inflection point that Jones kind of got in the way of back in 2022. We'll get into that news and some of the other moves along the way that James Jones had a chance to make and maybe did not, coming up next. First, today's show brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs, the best place to post your job and get a qualified candidate fast. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role, which is why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs, which has the tools to find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. They have a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, making it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else, all while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have so many qualified candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. I work for a small business, the job that I've had since September that I found through LinkedIn. They don't have like outreach people and temp agencies and all that. No, they just basically had LinkedIn. I was able to find a job that I knew I was qualified for based on the listings and the details that they provided. I was aware of the brand and the website and everything that I was going to entail, saw the pay and the benefits, and okay, that's a good fit for me. And then the hiring manager was listed right there as well. So I contacted them, got an interview scheduled within a couple days, basically was hired within a couple weeks, all thanks to LinkedIn. 2.5 small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Join them today by posting your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, let's keep it rolling here. The news that came out this week, Stephen, was from John Gambadoro here locally, basically reporting that back in 2022, we all remember Deandre Ayton gets an offer sheet from the Indiana Pacers. The Suns match it. They go out of their way to say they matched it within minutes and never thought twice and all this stuff. Apparently, Monty Williams was among the main voices pushing for the Suns to allow that to go through and basically work a sign and trade for Miles Turner. Now, it's no surprise, I think, to hear that Monty Williams would have been on board with trading Ayton. We've heard that he was open to wanting to do that as early as after the finals, the summer 2 years, or the year before that. And we know at the deadline in 2022, there was some momentum confirmed on the Indiana side and the Phoenix side of a Domantas Sabonis trade. Now, obviously, he ends up going to Sacramento, and he wasn't available by the time they signed him to that offer sheet. But we knew they wanted to move DA. I think what's surprising there more than anything to me is that it was Jones who got in the way of trading Ayton for Turner. And when you have that many opportunities to trade a guy who I think it's clear there is some limiting factor on, who is kind of holding you back both with his pay and his play on the court and his inconsistency, somebody had to be pushing for him to stick around. And I think this report makes me think that we're all pulling our hair out wondering why they're holding pat with Ayton, Stephen. And I think the answer might have been James Jones wanted him more than fans did, more than the coach did, more than ownership did. Maybe it was Jones all along who wanted this guy to stay in and hold out hope he was going to turn the corner.
It definitely seems like that. And considering the from the outside looking in, of course, the deemed control levels that James Jones had with things prior to Matt Ishbia stepping in, this definitely tracks and checks out for me. I would like to assume that more than any of us on the outside who could see the disconnect between Deandre Ayton and Monty Williams, I would like to assume that James Jones was more aware of it and aware of it for longer than we were from public perception. So I think that, in addition to just seeing what the potential of 5-out spacing would do for everything that the offense that Monty Williams was running would look like, and to have that in addition to, the other pieces with Chris Paul still around and obviously with Devin Booker still coming into his own at the time, I think that's something that certainly could have been used, especially considering the hurdles that we saw with Deandre Ayton in the playoffs that in 2022. Just thinking about all of that and thinking about the difference in level of defense, which wasn't hardly much to scoff at, I just feel like that's traded was something that should have happened for the interpersonal parts of it, in addition to the on-court product piece, and just, again, taking a little bit of risk, changing the dynamic of the team up a little bit, and potentially trying to expand that title contending window that you were operating in that current rendition of the roster. That was something that was somewhat perplexing for me to read into from from the news that broke on, I think it was on Tuesday or Monday this week. And definitely gave me some revisionist thoughts. And I want to always want to delve into playing Monday morning quarterback, talking about things after they happen. But just looking at, again, the functionality, looking at the window that Miles Turner has been operating in over the last couple of seasons.
He's been so good in this postseason.
It's been so good. And if you're telling me that he could do this in the context of everything that the Indiana Pacers have right now, a premier point guard, one of the best playmakers in the NBA, a couple of wings that can do a ton of different things, some athletes around him. If you can see what he's doing with this team, you can't tell me that he wouldn't have absolutely thrived in the offense that the Suns were running in 2022 or after 2022. And I think the context and fit and opportunity all align with Miles Turner.
Yeah, and he makes like half as much as DA, you know, and so the whole idea of he basically makes the same amount Nurk makes, a little more, I think. So it's like it just puts it into perspective that if that opportunity was there, that really was a swing and a miss. And I'll say, like, I never pretend to be any kind of insider, and anything I hear is 2 steps, 3 steps removed from anything. But I will say, like, it got even to me, who does not report about this stuff at all, that this was on the table back then. Like, I think people around both sides of this whole situation felt like that was on the table. And for whatever reason, I think we're in agreement. That reason very well might have been James Jones. It didn't. But the other thing I'll say is it kind of speaks to this weird dynamic that I think you were touching on too, where it would, like, okay, James Jones talks about being all in. He talks about he's big on offense, right? He even was kind of getting back to that with the Bud hire, and putting the ball in the basket is what wins championships. He said something along those lines, and he's, of course, not a surprise based on what he was as an NBA player, always been big on shooting. You know, but it's funny to look at that, and then it's like, okay, it sort of feels like he's going to be all in. He's going to target offense, but there is something safe about a lot of the moves. Even with, you would think, if somebody's trading all these draft picks away and, you know, sticking to their guns in terms of their evaluation of personnel, and they're so all in on offense, like, you kind of think it would look something like the Celtics. Not that they're not an all offense team, because their best players happen to be great defenders and they kind of got lucky with that, but they're 5 out. They're everybody on the court can shoot, you know,
40 plus threes a game.
Everybody can handle, like, the Suns have never really ventured into that type of really progressive kind of boundary pushing type of offense. It's Cam Johnson. I can even throw other, like Ty Jerome, you know, it's Landry Shamet, it's Aaron Baines, you know, and Jalen Smith. Like, it feels like, okay, these are the things I value, but then I'm going to find the most kind of like generic or safe version of that. And that's, I think, where he's gone wrong. Like, I have no issue if you want to come off of a finals appearance and trade your first round pick instead of taking somebody, which, you know, could have been Miles McBride or all these guys. But it's like Landry Shamet, you know, even at the time, if you bought that move, which I did, I'm not going to pretend like I didn't. I thought that would really help them. But the upside of it, that's not a very big swing. It's like, okay, we're going to stick to our guns in the 2020 NBA draft. We have, you know, Tyrese Haliburton might not have wanted to come to Phoenix. There's all sorts of things you can get into about that, but it's like, you didn't stick to your guns with a high upside home run swing. You stuck to your guns on a guy who's like maybe a starting big, probably a bench big in Jalen Smith. Even in real time, it felt that way. So I know I'm ranting now, but like, that's always been what trips us up here about evaluating James Jones, is he says the right things. He has a mentality that seems to be right, but the moves are just kind of 10% shy of what it really could have been.
Yep. And I love everything that you said. It's the perfect segue into something else that I want to speak to. So we've been speaking in revisionist perspectives through a revisionist lens. You bring the context of even most recently, all the reports that came around the Kevin Durant trade finally getting pushed across the finish line. It wasn't James Jones that finished that deal. It was Matt Ishbia that basically lit the fire, lit the spark, and told him like, hey, kick this across the finish line. I don't care what it takes. If he wants to be the mayor of Phoenix, I'll holler at the alderman and everything, and we'll make it happen. Like, that's the type of rationing up.
Steven's giving the keys to the city away from miles from 20 states over.
Hey, listen, but that's the type of energy and attitude that if to do something that you haven't done, you have to do something that you want to do that you haven't quite succeeded at. You have to do something you've never done. You're not going to get to where you want to be if you're consistently playing it safe. You got to take some risks. You got to do something that might be uncomfortable for you, like shooting more three-pointers. Again, all of these different contexts is sprinkled all around the organization, and that's why I feel like you talk about a breath of fresh air. There's positives that come with Matt Ishbia, but there's a level of accountability to where he's lighting a fire under people, and he's forcing them to get somewhat uncomfortable for growth. You can't grow without being uncomfortable in some capacity. And to just the general feeling of the Suns has been very, very comfortable, very comfortable, very comfortable. Philosophy-wise, the way the team plays, like that gets you to a certain extent, but without taking certain levels of risks, obviously it's going to come with some failures, but you can't get the rewards that come with that risk without taking them. And if you just sit in this box, you're going to consistently get similar results after similar results. And that might be the one thing that's really holding this franchise back from ascending to being a potential contender again and potentially actually winning a championship, is taking that risk. Adding something that they might not necessarily, you might have to detach from some of the things that you're comfortable with, like players and XYZ and ABC, to get something else that's going to ratchet things up, that's going to take things to a different level, give you a different feel, and potentially, like I said, get you to where you desire to be ultimately. And I think nobody's going to understand that more than Matt Ishbia with how he does moves in the business realm and how he's brought those same moves and energy and intangibles to his business making decisions in the basketball realm.
Yeah, I mean, you just look at who the Suns are going to have to beat now. And I talked about this a little bit on this week's show with Brandon when we were saying, like, can the Suns compete with with what's winning in the NBA right now? And I asked Bud a question like this, and he kind of said, hey, we have three guys who can make life really hard on a defense, and that as a starting point is always going to be great. He's not going to show his hand. He hasn't talked to anybody. I get it, but I wanted to hear what he thought, and I think it's still true. Like, it's not just like part of the reason the big threes people say they don't work, or why you could make a case that they don't work anymore, is not just because of the salaries or the depth of the league or any of that. To me, it's also that you sacrifice your ability to win on the margins because star players tend to not play that way. You know what I mean? And offensive rebounding, spacing, pace, forcing turnovers, all these sorts of things that the Thunder, the Wolves, the Pacers, the Celtics do. Stars, you're lucky if you find a star who's going to be a great offensive rebounder and a great defender. And, you know, that's rare. They tend to be what they are is what they are, and you play through that, and you get other guys to do those things. But if you have three of those stars and you can't, so I think the fact that the Thunder and the Celtics and some of these forward-thinking teams are the ones that are winning shouldn't be a surprise, and you have to match that. You can't just kind of pretend like that's going to keep winning. But let's talk about what is facing the Suns this offseason a little bit more and some of the things that they can target and, again, get out of the revisionist stuff. Coming up next. First, today's show brought to you by eBay Motors. One of my favorite sponsors, frankly. They've saved me time and again. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits. They have more examples. I'll give you mine. Sunshade inside for the flap that protects your eyes when you're trying to drive, which matters a lot in Arizona. A wheel cover. Yeah, it does. Wheel cover.
I got one too. Yep.
Wheel cover, which tends to just fall off because there's potholes all over downtown where I have to go drive to cover Suns games. eBay Motors has you covered. They tell you what fits your car right there on the screen. You put your model and make and all that stuff in, and it has a little icon. Hey, this one's going to work for you, buy it. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. With eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash, with all the parts you need at the prices you want It's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit. Only available to U.S. customers. All right, let's close out the show. So I've talked myself out of in like a week, Stephen. At first, I was like, it's too good of an opportunity with the 22nd pick. You don't know what the future is going to look like. You're not going to have a pick until 2026. By then, a lot could have changed. Take a player. Take a player. And the more that I just look at what feels like such a talent gap right now between the Suns and other teams, and you just see the moves that they've made to upgrade at coach, try to reform the front office, and the game that they're talking publicly, I don't think they're going to, and I don't think they should. And I think that, to me, like that's, if you're talking about pressure and you're talking about this being kind of a last chance for James Jones to right the ship, so to speak, that's the biggest move they have at their disposal. He has to nail it. I don't know exactly what form it will take. Will it include Nurkic? Will it include Little? Will it include this year's pick and the 2031 pick, or just one of those? That's for him to decide. But you got to nail that. And that's the number one way for the Suns to get closer to a championship. And therefore, it's the thing he has to accomplish this offseason. I think number one without a clear number two. That's the one.
Yep, as it presently stands, that's where I was as well. Just kind of assessing things going forward. I felt like, especially after trading Toumani Camara last season and seeing what type of player he ultimately evolved into by the end of his rookie year, and seeing the things that he added and how those things could have been of great assets to everything around Bradley Beal, Devin Booker, and Kevin Durant. My objective was for them to find another Toumani in this upcoming draft before kind of assessing everything else with the second apron stipulations and all of that stuff. I'm very much inclined to believe the same as you now, just by reading and seeing the things and hearing the things that we have the last month, and is that they'll be trying to figure out how they can attach it to a player and get something of value in return that addresses a need in some capacity. That's something, like you said, they got not just a home run, they got to hit a grand slam with that thing at this point. And it's going to be tough sledding because this is not the deepest draft. This is not the most polarizing draft. If anything, people are saying this is one of the weakest drafts in recent memory. So finding somebody that's going to value that 22nd pick to your liking is going to be tough, especially if you're attaching that pick that has to match their liking with a player that has to match their liking in some capacity as well. You know, you're not going to trade something that's unappealing and get something that you find appealing more often than not, especially if you're in the contending realm, which they very much full-fledgedly are. So it's going to be interesting to see how they navigate those waters. I think Bobby Marks mentioned some intriguing things as far as how they could get creative with this second tax apron stipulations and kind of duck it in a sense to kind of put themselves in more cap.
Yeah, what did you like from what
situations.
he said? Because my wheels were turning a little bit with some of it, but what stood out to you? You're talking about the PHNX spot he did, right?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing was I believe he mentioned trading Nurkic and being able to get under that second tax apron threshold, and then being able to free yourself up with a little bit of cap space to make something happen. I think that's obviously the best way. I think that might be just kind of looking at things a little bit too lovingly, because it's not going to be easy to do that. Might be a little bit of homerism with that mindset. It's not impossible, but it's also not going to be easy. And we've been talking about James Jones not taking risks. That's something that's going to take a lot of risk, because again, that could hurt, or it could obviously help. So just seeing how he decides to move this upcoming offseason is going to be important. And I think if what Bobby Marks is saying is true, which I 100% believe it is, they'll be remiss to not at least attempt and push that across the finish line, no different than they did with the Kevin Durant trade. Because for different reasons, it could be as big as anything else that's happened over the last couple of seasons as far as shape-shifting the roster to keep up with the Joneses and contending.
Or, yeah, be a Jones that can keep up with everybody else, I guess, in this case.
And no pun intended with his last name. Exactly.
Yeah. Look, so like the way people talk about it with somebody like Nurkic, the cap people and whatnot out there in the NBA world is like you're gonna have to usually give some kind of draft capital up to get off of a contract as bad. We'll just call it a bad contract. That's what it is for a player like that, you know? So it's not just, oh, let's use his salary to get blank if you're the Suns. It's you have to find a team that even has playing time for him and find a team that doesn't consider it just horrible money, whatever. So probably a team that has a little bit of flexibility, maybe even cap room, and then also has something you want. Like I've gone through a lot of the options, but you're right that it's not going to be easy. And even if they were to do some of the stuff of getting rid of Nurkic to get under the second apron, well, they're still in the first apron, and so they're not getting all the way to a mid-level like, you know, a Dante DiVincenzo or, you know, in 2020 the Suns getting Jay Crowder. They're only able to use like the mini mid-level and a biannual exception at that point. So more than the minimum, their pool of guys they could get goes up. But then you're sort of back to, well, would taking the player at 22, is that guy going to be more valuable than somebody that you can go get with a $4 or $5 million exception? Like, I don't know. I liked what he said about Royce O'Neal signing him to maybe a bigger contract than we think. And I've heard people like, again, some of the cap gurus out there, Nate Duncan, Danny LaRue, dunked on people. They've called that like a, you know, it's a little dehumanizing, so, but like a walking trade exception is what they call players like that who are on these really inflated, kind of like what Gordon Hayward was with coming to Oklahoma City, where everybody knows he's not really worth that contract, but for them, it's kind of nice to actually take a player who makes that much money back. And for the Hornets, it helped them get 3 guys in the door who they might not have otherwise. So using O'Neal that way could help. There's avenues is the point, but I just think Dallas makes a PJ Washington trade. Could point to numerous examples of all the best teams that have made their swing in a timely fashion, and it worked out. You know, the Pacers, the Suns aren't going to get somebody as good as Siakam, but they saw, hey, we're going to get expensive and good quicker than we realized. Let's pounce now, and it worked out. The Suns are not going to probably get a player that good, or maybe even as good as PJ Washington, but what can you do? And get one more guy in the door and get your rotation to 7-8 guys you trust instead of 6 or 7, and hope that works out. But
I think the other big thing in all of that, which I think will help to push things in addition to Matt Ishbia's desire to win and win now, is Mike Budenholzer. He knows what he needs. He has a proven track record in getting what he needs and seeing how he can push things across the finish line. I just don't see him and all of his principles and philosophies, that not just what he's spoken verbatim, but what we've literally seen him be successful with at the center position. I just don't see Yusuf Nurkic and the things that he does and doesn't bring to the table aligning with the things that, like, there's a conflict of interest there in terms of what his strengths are and what the strengths that are non-negotiable for a Mike Budenholzer anchor to be and bring to the table on offense or defense, which is spacing, in terms of being a legit threat from past the mid-range area or past the basket, but also being able to finish at the basket on efficiency, 2 things that Nurkic doesn't do. And then on defense, providing relevant and substantial rim protection in some capacity, and even the slightest bit of a level of defensive versatility. I think he's going to demand those things in addition to the conversations that I'm sure Matt Ishbia has already been having with James Jones. So having 2 in addition to just Matt, having him and Mike Budenholzer with that energy, I think is going to help to push things across the finish line, potentially take some risks. And we might see them, swing and find something to fill that void at the center position. But it's also not just the starting position. It's also that backup center spot that they need to address as well. Obviously, the reserve realm is a lot easier to address than the starting realm, and that's the biggest domino. But I do feel like they'll address both of those 2 with everything that Mike Budenholzer is coming in with.
And if they don't, I think, to return back to square one of all this, we're going to have even more difficult conversations here in Phoenix, I think, next summer. Or maybe it won't be difficult at all, and it'll just be obvious kind of what has to happen, which is, what's left to change. The big 3 aren't going to be off limits anymore. The front office even a bigger shakeup. So, they have an opportunity. They have a coach with a much more cogent philosophy that they can match to rather than just sort of tinkering and guessing. And they have assets, not the best, but they do have them. So we'll see. All right, that'll wrap us up for the week. Enjoy your Memorial Day weekend. I will have an episode for you on Monday, I believe. So that'll be something to look forward to, I suppose. We'll get some more Suns news, I'm sure. Hit follow or subscribe to get all that in your feed as the offseason rolls on. Don't forget to read Stephen at Bright Side of the Sun. Watch his work over at PHNX. And I'll talk to you guys next week.